What's up everyone? It's Aaron Schatz here, and it's time for another Cooking with Aaron video. Today, I'm actually going to be doing some chicken stock or chicken broth, depending on which definition you like to use. Now, a lot of people say chicken stock is basically you throw bones in a pot with water and let it boil, and then you got stock. And broth is basically you throw whatever, bones, meat, all the stuff of the chicken in there, with other spices and stuff, and then that's a broth because it's more heartier. So we can consider that we're making a broth or a stock because it has bones in it. To start, you're going to need some spices, bay leaf, Italian seasoning, thyme, whatever you want to put into this, it's up to you. You don't have to put in any seasoning if you don't want to. The stock will come out just fine regardless. You're going to need a sauce, a heavy bottom saucepan, or a stock pot, basically. If you had a bigger one, that's better, because you will be using stuff like a whole chicken right here. Boom, nice whole chicken. And then whatever chicken parts you have. I have some breast here, split breast. I got chicken thighs. And we're also going to put a couple of turnips in there for a little bit of extra flavor. So you can consider this a broth. And the first step you're going to do is to make sure the chicken is all rinsed off. So we'll do that right now. I'm not going to bore you with washing off the chicken, so we're going to jump right after that. So wash the chicken off, I'll wait. And now that you're done washing the chicken off, we're going to throw all the chicken in the pot and then put water into it. While I'm washing the chicken off camera, which is very strange because you're watching me talk to you while I'm doing this, but after you're done, we'll move on to the next step. So wash all your chicken out and then get it ready because we're going to throw it in the pot and put water in it. Now, as you can see, we've got all the chicken in the pot, and you can see the whole chicken's in there, all the skin, everything, the thighs in there, nothing. I didn't trim anything, I didn't do anything. This is going to be the base of other things for me. So if you want to make a stock or a broth, what you'll do after is actually, strain everything out, and that's the actual liquidy part is the stock or the broth. Since I'm going to be making everything else, there's an extra step that I'm going to have to, or a bunch of extra steps, which I'll put in another video to show you. But basically, you got everything in here. Throw whatever additional things you want to put in here. So I got these turnips. I'm just going to throw in here like this. And if you want to put some garlic and some other stuff at this point, you're welcome to. You can put some thyme. You can put rosemary. Whatever kind of aromatics you want to put in here is totally fine. I'm going to step over here. And then we're going to make sure we got cold water. Okay, water's cold. And then we're basically just going to fill this up. That's where it helps to have an extended nozzle on your sink. And we're just going to let this fill up until it reaches covering all the chicken, which shouldn't take long at all. So just let that go. And the next step is basically just put it on the fire and get it to simmer. You want it to bring it to a boil and then just let it simmer. So here we go, almost there. This is where a larger pot helps if you're cooking a lot of stuff. That's good enough. So all the chicken's covered. And now we're just going to put this on the stove and let it go. All that chicken is in there. The turnips are in there. If you want to put some aromatics in here right now, like I said, you can do that. I'll put a little bit of Italian seasoning in here. You can use fresh as well. Fresh is better. Listen, you work with what you got. That's what cooking's all about. Put a little thyme if you want. Thyme goes great with chicken. Bay leaves, you can put them in now. If you're making a soup or a stew, you can put them in after you've made the stock or the broth, which is what I'm going to do. So after you get all the aromatics in there, the heat's on, bring it up to a boil, and then put it down to a simmer. And then once that starts, once the simmering starts, you're going to notice a lot of stuff happening. There's going to be foam and stuff that you're going to actually have to skim off the top. So that's why you get some type of utensil ready to go, so you can start skimming it off the top. And now we just wait till it to boil. This is what it looks like before it starts to boil. I really just put it on. You could see that it's just starting to move around and stuff. The heat's starting to come out. And once this starts to actually get to a simmer is when you really have to start watching it, because it'll start to foam up and you got to remove that foam. So we'll wait until it starts to boil, and then we'll come back. It's at this point that if you were going to make a stew or a soup like I am with the stock or the broth or whatever you want to call it, you can actually cut up your other stuff, your other vegetables, your mirepoix. Mirepoix you'll hear a lot in cooking. Mirepoix is basically onions, carrots, and celery. That's all it is. It's just cut up onions, celery, and celery. That's mirepoix. So if you hear mirepoix, it's nothing special. It's just plain onions, plain carrots, and plain celery. And that's really what you need for a soup. Onions, carrots, and celery. That pretty much gives all the body to it. So when you're making a soup, those three ingredients are very important to use. If you're going to make a stew, like I am, you're going to want some additional things. You want things like, well, you can throw anything in the stew, really. It's like a one-pot meal. So think of it this way. I've got kale going in it, chard, bok choy, Chinese cabbage, whatever you want to throw in. You could throw in all kinds of root vegetables. I'm also throwing in radishes and pretty much whatever I have on hand to just throw in there. That's the beauty of a stew. You just throw whatever you have in a pot that you like, and it cooks up and makes a great flavor. You can eat it all, and you got enough protein. You've got your great antioxidants if you want to throw like broccolis and stuff in there. So really, a stew is like a great way to have an entire meal in basically a bowl. So if you want to do that, I'll show you that in another video, but this is how you get started. As you can see, that we're probably halfway through where it starts to boiling, because the water's getting all cloudy. You can see the chicken's starting to turn nice and white instead of pink, and it's really getting up to heat right now. So we'll check back in a few, and hopefully it starts to boil pretty quickly. You can see that there is stuff starting to accumulate on the top, and this is the start of the foam that's going to come off. So basically all the fat and all the other stuff is going to start to foam the top right here, and then you're just going to have to just skim it off with a utensil like this or a slotted spoon or something. You'll see it gets really thick when it starts to really get to a nice roaring boil. You can also see that the fat is starting to really render off. You can see the fat globules like here and here. And the other important part about making a stock or a broth is letting this cool once you remove everything out of it and skimming this fat off the top, because when you eat soup or any kind of liquidy thing, it really sucks when you're like, the top of it has a big layer of fat on it. So when you're done and you have your stock all made, get it cold, then skim the fat off the top, and that's really the final step. But we're going to come back, see when this is going to start to really foam up, and then we'll take it from there. We are almost there. It's almost coming to a boil. You can see the water start to have some bubbles and stuff in it. You can see the foam really starting to collect at the top. When this comes to like a hard boil, you're going to really see the foam. So this is the point where you really have to pay attention to this, because what will happen is the foam will just start to come out and overflow and make a giant mess. So we could start skimming this foam right now, and these turnips that I got in here are kind of making it a pain. But basically what you would do is you just go on the top right here and you just skim this right off the top here. So, and that foam just comes off like that, and you basically have like a plate or something, and you just drop it in the plate right next to it, and you just continue doing that. And then eventually what will happen is the foam will just cease to start coming up anymore, because basically it'll be all foamed out. There's probably a better term for it, but all the stuff that's creating the foam is eventually going to be cooked out, and once you skim it all, it's gone, and it won't foam too much anymore, if at all. So just start doing that. Pay attention, because this is the point where kitchen disasters happen. It's just like when you're cooking pasta and you by accident leave it alone, and all of a sudden it just starts to boil out over everywhere. This is the same situation. So right now is the point where we're actually going to pay attention to it, and we'll be right back. Now you can really see that the foam is starting to come up, and this is where you're going to start just skimming the top. Look at it, all this nice foam. Put it in this plate right here. You just take it all off. Just keep going until the foam basically stops. Just keep going around the bowl, the pot, and eventually the foam will stop coming up. So just make sure you're paying attention at this point in time. You can see that it's starting to come to a boil, and then once it does that, we'll lower it into a simmer. If you don't know the difference, a simmer is basically a very, very light boil. not a rolling boil. So right now, this is looking sort of like a rolling boil, right? We have a lot, big bubbles coming up, and you can see that, you know, it's coming up from all over the place. Simmering basically just means that you're lowering the heat enough so that you still get very little bubble action, but it's hot enough to continue to cook. Now, you're going to notice that because we're actually cooking this, water's going to evaporate from the actual pot. So there'll be some times that you might have to put more water in to cover the chicken all the way. And the chicken is just going to start floating to the surface, and that's not a big deal. Just push it back down. But if you're noticing that you're losing a lot of water, just put more water in and make sure it's still at a simmer. If you don't know what schmaltz is a very Yiddishy and Jewish type of thing. It's actually rendered chicken fat. And this is it right here, basically. It's this, you know, oily fat from the chicken. And when I say rendered, I mean it's like at room temperature this. It's kind of like, if you think about it, it's kind of gross, but it's one of the best tasting things in Jewish type of cooking. It's what gives all the flavor, this high fat content. Basically, it's all fat. And right here, skim a little bit of this. And that's schmaltz right there for you. Yum. So at this point in time, you're just going to make sure that all the cavities and stuff of the chicken, just going to reach down in here and just move stuff around. Make sure all the liquid's covering everything. You don't want anything to burn on the bottom of the pot, because, you know, if the piece of the chicken's touching the actual bottom and there's no liquid, it's going to burn. So just make sure that, you know, you move everything around just a little bit, just to, you know, stir it up, make sure that all the liquid's covering it. And now, since this is boiling, we're going to lower it to a simmer. So let's just do that right now. And just lower it just enough so it becomes a simmer. Now at this point in time, because it's not really foaming anymore, see all the foam is pretty much gone. It's in this plate right here, which I'll show you, this bowl, along with some of the oil. You can actually cover this and let this, you know, basically cook down. And you want to let this cook down for a couple of hours at least. And if you're going to make a soup or some type of stew or something with the meat, you're going to really want to let this cook for, you know, a couple hours until the meat basically falls off the bones and you could shred it. After that, you basically strain all the stuff out of here into another container, and then you let that cool. After it's cooled, you can actually strain all the fat off of it. You want to skim this fat. See all the fat collecting at the top right here? That's gross. You want to get rid of it. So right now, this is basically a simmer. As you can see, that there's bubble action, but it's not like a rolling boil. So this is what I mean by simmer. So once you get it to this stage, it's really good to go on autopilot for a while. If you want to be really cautious, do a little trick. Put the spoon right here. So in case it does foam up, it's not going to overflow. It'll just start to come out this. It'll come in the center and basically stop it from overflowing. Little tip for you right there. And, you know, basically in a couple hours we'll come back and see how this is doing. Like literally a couple of hours. Like I said earlier, you can cover this if you want, or what you can do is you can just let this cook off, and if everything starts to evaporate too much, just continue to add some water in every once in a while just to bring it back up. Basically what's going to happen is the water's going to evaporate, but you're going to be left with this really, really good dense stock. So just keep adding water, and if you want to, you could throw the cover on here. You'll lose a lot less water, but if you actually leave the cover on, if you put the cover on, it's going to basically cook a lot faster. So you just got to make sure that you lower the heat enough to where it's simmering. Because at this level, if I put the cover on, it'll probably turn into a boil again. So just make sure that it's not going to be cooking way too fast. The broth or the stock, depending on how you look at it, has been cooking for about 2 hours, and you can see it's all nice and floating to the top. It's like ravioli. It's like done. And basically what we're going to do now is we're going to turn the heat off and then remove all the stuff out of the liquid. It's at this point that if you're going to make a stew or some type of other thing with the meat, take it out of the pot, shred it, remove whatever you don't want, like the skin, the bones, and then set it aside, because what you're going to have to do is cool all the liquid in here and skim the fat off the top. So let's remove all the stuff out of the liquid. I have the stock or the broth, whatever we're calling it these days, right here. I'm going to take all the turnips and all the meat and put it in here. Then what we're going to do is we're going to get another container and strain this. And then that's the container that we're going to use to skim the fat out. So get all the chunky stuff, put it in here, use it for whatever you need to use it for, and then we'll strain the actual liquid. I have removed all of the pieces, the large pieces, out of the actual broth and put them in this container right here. Now if you're going to shred this and put it back in, you're going to wait till this to cool down because as you can see it's nice and steaming hot. Now for the actual liquid, we're going to take it over to the sink and we're going to strain it. I set up another container in the sink and we have the pot with all the nice stuff. It smells pretty good. And we're just going to basically strain it right now, so we just strain it right through it. And this is getting any of the fine particulate out of there. And you see all the crud and stuff on the bottom of that. And this is what we strained out. And you just discard this, basically. So we'll let that go. And it's at this point that you have your stock or your broth ready to go. So let me just move this camera over here and I'll show you. Now if you see, right in this pot right here, or this container, this is actually the stock or the broth ready to go. What you're going to do is you're going to put this in a cool area, and since it's winter time right now, we're just going to put it outside, cover it, so no like animals get in it, and then wait for the fat on the top. As you can see, there's tons of fat on the top. Wait for that to solidify a little bit, and then you just remove that, and then boom, you got your stock. So let's wait a few hours while this cools outside, and we'll see what it looks like. As you can see, after leaving it out in the cold air for a few hours, and I mean like, I think it was 4 or 5 hours in the cold, you can see the fat has finally congealed. So at this point, you can just skim it off and throw it away, or if you want to make some schmaltz, save it in a container. And you can see, like, look at this. Gross. So this is all fat. You just put it in there and save it. It's kind of gross and disgusting. I mean, that's why you don't want to eat this stuff. But you can cook with it. So we're going to save it. Just skim it all out of there. As much as you can, because otherwise this would turn into, it would make your whatever final thing you're going to make, like a soup or a stew, it would make it all oily, and you don't want that. So we're just going to remove all of the stuff in here, and then once you're done, pack it up, put whatever containers you want. Like if you can freeze this, you could do a lot of different stuff with this. Stock can be used for a variety of things. It could be used for cooking. Like for instance, you can make rice with stock instead of like just plain water, and it's better than bouillon. It really is. It's better than putting a bouillon cube in, and it's also healthier. If you noticed, I didn't put any salt in this. Now yeah, if you like salt, you can put salt in it. However, do it to taste. You don't need to just automatically put salt in stuff. So at this point, you're done. Just pack it up, and you're good to go, and that's how you make stock or broth. Yum. That was the basic process of creating a stock or a broth, depending on what you want to call it. Stock usually has bones, broth usually is a more hearty thing. But the important stuff is now you have this. All this good stuff right here, ready to go for you to make a soup. You could shred this, make shredded chicken. You'd probably have to cook it a little bit more to get it really shredded. But what we're going to do is we're going to basically take all this stuff, remove all the skin, remove any of the additional fat on here that we can, get our stock, throw this back in there, put some mirepoix in, make a giant stew. That'll be another recipe for another time. Thanks for watching this one. If you have any comments, you'd like to see additional recipes, send them to me, and I'll be happy to attempt to do them. And I say attempt because it may or may not happen. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next one.